My name is Ethan Miller, and I grew up in the quiet suburbs of Denver, Colorado. Life had always been simple for me, maybe even predictable. I was the kind of man who valued routine, early mornings at the gym, coffee at the same corner cafe, work at my engineering firm, and evenings spent with my wife, Emily. To outsiders, we seemed like the perfect couple. High school sweethearts who made it through college together, married at 24, and bought our first home by 27. But life has a strange way of reminding us that nothing is permanent, nothing is guaranteed. It all began on a cold November morning. I was driving down Interstate 25 on my way to work when a truck skidded on the icy road and slammed into my car. The crash was violent. I remember the sound of metal twisting, glass shattering, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't at the accident scene. I was lying in a white hospital room, machines beeping steadily beside me. My body felt heavy, my chest ached, and confusion washed over me. A nurse leaned over and whispered, "You're awake, Mr. Miller. Just stay calm. You've been through an accident." That was when I realized several days had passed. My head throbbed, but I was alive. Alive, but not the same. Emily was there too. She rushed into the room with tears in her eyes, clutching my hand as if she had almost lost me. For a while, everything seemed normal. She kissed my forehead, told me how worried she had been, and promised she would stay by my side through recovery. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But sometimes, the truth hides in the smallest cracks of everyday life. During my hospital stay, I noticed things that didn't add up. Emily would leave the room late at night, claiming she needed fresh air, and she'd come back with her hair slightly messy or her phone tucked away too quickly. I tried not to overthink it. I was vulnerable, drugged on painkillers, and maybe paranoia was playing tricks on me. One evening, though, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I had drifted in and out of consciousness after a round of medication. The nurses dimmed the lights, and the hospital floor grew quiet. Somewhere between sleep and awareness, I heard voices. Emily's voice, soft, almost guilty, and another man's voice. I couldn't see clearly through my half-shut eyes, but I knew it wasn't a nurse or doctor I recognized. The words were muffled, but I caught enough. "You can't keep doing this here," the man said in a hushed tone. Emily whispered back, I feel so lost. He might never be the same again." My chest tightened. At that moment, I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or if I was awake. But deep down, I knew. She wasn't alone. She wasn't just grieving. She was crossing a line. When morning came, I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination. But the doubts refused to leave. Every time Emily stepped out of the room, I found myself staring at the door, wondering who she was texting, who she was meeting, and why she looked away when I asked simple questions. I decided to stay quiet. I needed proof, not suspicion. Days turned into weeks. Physical therapy began, and though my body healed slowly, my heart grew heavier. The nurses often encouraged me, telling me how lucky I was to have such a devoted wife. They didn't see the flicker in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. One afternoon, while Emily was gone, a young nurse named Claire entered the room to check on me. She was kind, maybe a little too observant. After adjusting my IV, she paused and said gently, "Mr. Miller, sometimes patients notice things others don't. I just want you to know, if you ever need to talk, I'm here." Her words startled me. Was she hinting at something? Did she know? I didn't respond directly, but I tucked that thought away. The turning point came one night when I pretended to be asleep. Emily slipped out of the room, as she often did, and I waited. Minutes later, I heard faint laughter down the hallway. My body still weak, I pushed myself up and slowly made my way to the door, leaning heavily on my IV stand. My legs trembled, but determination kept me moving. Following the sound, I turned a corner near the empty visitor lounge. And there they were, Emily and a man I vaguely recognized, Mark, a family friend who had visited us a few times before. His hand brushed against hers, and though nothing explicit happened, the intimacy was undeniable. The way she looked at him, the way he leaned in too close, it was the kind of closeness reserved for a husband and wife, not a friend. My heart shattered right there in that dim hallway. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I retreated silently to my room, my chest pounding with pain that no medication could numb. Lying back on the bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Why would she betray me here, of all places, when I was fighting to recover, when I needed her most? The next morning, I couldn't hold it in any longer. When Emily returned, carrying her usual forced smile, I looked her straight in the eyes and asked, "How long, Emily? How long have you been lying to me?" Her face went pale. "What are you talking about? Don't play games. I saw you with Mark last night." She froze, and for a moment, the room was silent except for the beeping monitor beside me. Then tears welled up in her eyes. "Ethan, I didn't mean for this to happen. I was so scared of losing you. I felt so alone, and he was there. I made a mistake, but it's not what you think." Her excuses cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I wanted to scream, to rage, but my body was too weak. All I could manage was a broken whisper, "You promised to stand by me. And when I was unconscious, when I couldn't even defend myself, that's when you chose to give up on us." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. The silence that followed was heavier than any words could ever be. Recovery became more than just physical after that. It was emotional, spiritual, and deeply lonely. Emily continued visiting, trying to mend what she had broken, but trust, once shattered, doesn't rebuild overnight. Claire, the nurse, often checked in on me with small encouragements. She never spoke ill of Emily, but her quiet presence reminded me that kindness still existed in the world. That not everyone turned away when things grew hard. Weeks later, I was discharged from the hospital. Emily drove me home, the air between us thick with unspoken words. Our house, once a place of warmth, felt unfamiliar. The pictures on the walls, the memories we had built, they all looked different through the lens of betrayal. That night, I lay awake in our bed while Emily slept beside me. My mind replayed everything, our wedding vows, the accident, the hospital room, the hallway. And then a single truth settled in my heart. Sometimes love isn't enough to erase betrayal. Sometimes forgiveness is a journey, not a decision. I didn't know what the future held for us. Divorce, reconciliation, or something in between. But I knew one thing for sure, this chapter of my life had changed me forever. I wasn't the same Ethan Miller who left for work that icy November morning. I was someone who had faced death, survived betrayal, and learned that strength isn't just about standing tall. Sometimes, it's about knowing when to let go. And so, my story isn't about revenge or bitterness. It's about truth, resilience, and the painful reminder that trust is the most fragile gift two people can share. As I sit here writing this months later, I'm still healing. Some days the scars ache, both inside and out. But I hold on to hope, that one day, whether with Emily or without her, I'll find peace again. Because even in betrayal, even in heartbreak, life moves forward. After that night at home, silence became our new language. Emily tried to talk to me, tried to explain herself again and again, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. Every word felt like a stone pressing against my chest, heavy and unmovable. She would cook my meals, adjust my pillows, drive me to therapy, and yet every act of care only reminded me of her betrayal. My heart couldn't forget what my eyes had seen in that hospital hallway. I started to spend more time outside the house. At first it was just walks down the block with my cane, then slowly longer trips to the park, sitting on benches watching children play while the Colorado sun set behind the mountains. Those moments felt freeing, as if the world hadn't completely fallen apart. I met people too, ordinary strangers who didn't know my story. A retired man named Harold who fed the pigeons, a young mother named Sarah who brought her toddler every afternoon, and sometimes even Claire, the nurse who had once watched over me, passing through the park on her way home. Claire always had the same gentle smile, the same steady kindness. She asked me once how I was really doing, not physically, but inside. And for the first time, I admitted it out loud. I don't know if I can ever trust her again. Claire didn't tell me what to do. She just nodded softly and said, "Healing takes time. Don't rush yourself into decisions you're not ready for." Her words stayed with me. Back at home, Emily's efforts grew more desperate. She left notes on the refrigerator, long handwritten letters on the nightstand, apologizing for her weakness, swearing it had never gone further than holding hands and stolen moments, begging me to give her another chance. She cried often, and I could hear her sobs at night when she thought I was asleep. Part of me still loved her. That was the hardest part. Love doesn't just vanish because of betrayal. It lingers like a shadow, reminding you of every good memory, every promise made when life still felt simple. But love without trust is like a house built on sand, it can't stand for long. One evening, after another long day of therapy, I found Emily waiting for me at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red, her hands clasped tightly together. "Ethan," she whispered, "I want to go to counseling. With you. I know I've broken us, but I want to try. Please, don't give up on me." I stared at her, torn between anger and exhaustion. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked myself if I was willing to fight for something that might already be gone. That night I lay awake again, listening to the sound of her breathing beside me. I thought about vows, about forgiveness, about second chances. I also thought about the image of her with Mark, the way she had looked at him like I wasn't enough. By morning, I made a decision. We started counseling. At first, it was unbearable. Every session felt like ripping open a wound that had barely begun to close. Emily admitted her loneliness, her fear of losing me after the accident, her weakness in finding comfort in someone else's presence. I admitted my rage, my sense of betrayal, my confusion about whether I wanted to stay or leave. The counselor told us healing wasn't about erasing what had happened, but learning whether we could build something new from the ruins. Weeks turned into months. Some days we made progress, other days I walked out of the room unable to breathe. Emily never stopped trying, though. She showed up every time, sometimes with trembling hands, sometimes with hope in her eyes, always with a determination I hadn't seen in her before. And slowly, against all odds, I began to see glimpses of the woman I had once fallen in love with. Not perfect, not unbroken, but human. Mark was no longer in our lives. Emily had cut him off completely, blocked his number, and even confessed everything to her closest friends so she would be held accountable. Whether that was enough, I wasn't sure, but it was a step. One afternoon, and for the first time, I admitted it out loud. I don't know if I can ever trust her again. Claire didn't tell me what to do. She just nodded softly and said, "Healing takes time. Don't rush yourself into decisions you're not ready for." Her words stayed with me. Back at home, Emily's efforts grew more desperate. She left notes on the refrigerator, long handwritten letters on the nightstand, apologizing for her weakness, swearing it had never gone further than holding hands and stolen moments, begging me to give her another chance. She cried often, and I could hear her sobs at night when she thought I was asleep. Part of me still loved her. That was the hardest part. Love doesn't just vanish because of betrayal. It lingers like a shadow, reminding you of every good memory, every promise made when life still felt simple. But love without trust is like a house built on sand, it can't stand for long. One evening, after another long day of therapy, I found Emily waiting for me at the kitchen table. Her eyes were red, her hands clasped tightly together. "Ethan," she whispered, "I want to go to counseling. With you. I know I've broken us, but I want to try. Please, don't give up on me." I stared at her, torn between anger and exhaustion. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I asked myself if I was willing to fight for something that might already be gone. That night I lay awake again, listening to the sound of her breathing beside me. I thought about vows, about forgiveness, about second chances. I also thought about the image of her with Mark, the way she had looked at him like I wasn't enough. By morning, I made a decision. We started counseling. At first, it was unbearable. Every session felt like ripping open a wound that had barely begun to close. Emily admitted her loneliness, Her fear of losing me after the accident, her weakness in finding comfort in someone else's presence. I admitted my rage, my sense of betrayal, my confusion about whether I wanted to stay or leave. The counselor told us healing wasn't about erasing what had happened, but learning whether we could build something new from the ruins. Weeks turned into months. Some days we made progress, other days I walked out of the room unable to breathe. Emily never stopped trying, though. She showed up every time, sometimes with trembling hands, sometimes with hope in her eyes, always with a determination I hadn't seen in her before. And slowly, against all odds, I began to see glimpses of the woman I had once fallen in love with. Not perfect, not unbroken, but human. Mark was no longer in our lives. Emily had cut him off completely, blocked his number, and even confessed everything to her closest friends so she would be held accountable. Whether that was enough, I wasn't sure, but it was a step. One afternoon, as we walked through the same park where I had once sat alone, Emily reached for my hand. For the first time in months, I didn't pull away. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. As time passed, I realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what she had done. It was about choosing whether my future would be defined by pain or by hope. Could I ever trust her again fully? I didn't know, but I knew I didn't want to live forever chained to the memory of that hospital hallway. Life was giving me another chance to decide who I wanted to be. And maybe, just maybe, it was also giving us another chance to rebuild. Months went by, and little by little, life began to feel normal again. Therapy sessions were still difficult, but I was walking better, working part-time again, and spending less time drowning in anger. Emily tried her best every day, and though I could see the guilt still living inside her, she carried it with humility instead of excuses. I noticed changes in her. She didn't hide her phone anymore, she told me where she was going, and she became more present than ever. It was almost as if she was trying to rebuild me piece by piece with her actions, even if she knew I might never trust her fully again. But just when I started to believe that maybe we had turned a corner, the past found its way back to us. One evening, as we were finishing dinner, my phone buzzed. The message was from an unknown number, but the name it carried sent a chill through me. It was Mark. The text read, "Ethan, you deserve to know everything. Emily hasn't told you the whole truth." My hands trembled as I put the phone down. Emily noticed my expression and asked, "What's wrong?" I looked at her, my heart pounding, and said quietly, "It's Mark." Her face drained of color. "What did he say?" I didn't answer. Instead, I handed her the phone. She read the message and shook her head. "He's trying to destroy what we're fixing. I swear to you, Ethan, there's nothing more to tell." But doubts I had fought so hard to silence began roaring back inside me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had been too quick to try forgiving, if the counseling, the progress, the new beginning was just built on another lie. The next morning, curiosity won. Against my better judgment, I replied to Mark. I asked him what he meant, what he was hiding. Minutes later, he sent a long message claiming that Emily had promised to leave me during my hospital stay, that their connection was deeper than she admitted, and that she had only stayed because I survived. I didn't know if he was telling the truth or if he was trying to poison my mind, but the words burned like fire. When I confronted Emily, she broke down. She swore she had never promised to leave me, swore Mark was twisting things to make himself look important, swore she had ended everything the moment she realized the mistake she was making. Her tears were real, her desperation raw, but my heart was torn in two again. I walked out of the house and drove aimlessly through Denver, past the familiar streets and into the mountains, where the air was thin and cold. I needed space, distance, clarity. I stopped at a small diner near Boulder, and to my surprise, I ran into Claire. She was sitting by the window with a book and a cup of coffee. When she saw me, she smiled gently, as if she already knew I was carrying a storm inside me. "Rough day?" she asked softly. I nodded, sitting across from her. For a long time, I just stared at the table before whispering, "I don't know if I can keep doing this. Every time I think I'm healing, something new tears me open again." Claire listened without judgment. She didn't tell me to stay or leave. She just said, sometimes the people we love hurt us because of their weakness, not because we weren't enough. The question isn't whether she failed, it's whether you can still see a future where her presence brings you peace instead of pain. Her words sank deep into me. For the first time, I realized the choice wasn't about Mark or Emily or even the past. It was about me. What kind of life did I want moving forward? When I returned home that night, Emily was waiting at the door. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She ran to me and whispered, "Please don't give up on us. I know I hurt you, but I'm fighting for you with everything I have." "He's lying, Ethan. Please believe me, not him." I stood there in the doorway, torn between the woman who had betrayed me and the woman who was now begging me to stay. And as I looked into her eyes, I realized the final decision. The days that followed were the hardest I had ever known. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was another message from Mark. Every time Emily reached for my hand, I wondered if I was holding on to someone who had already let me go once before. I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadow of doubt. So I made a decision. I needed the truth, not half-truths, not guesses, not fears. I needed to know once and for all what really happened in that hospital. Quietly, without telling Emily, I reached out to a friend of mine named Daniel who worked in private investigations. I gave him Mark's name, his address, and asked him to find out everything he could. Weeks passed, and during that time I acted as normal as I could, though inside I was restless. Emily continued trying, and to anyone else we might have looked like a couple slowly healing. But inside me, the storm still raged. When Daniel finally called, my hands shook as I answered. "Ethan," he said, "I've got what you asked for. And you were right to be suspicious." My heart sank. He explained that Mark had a pattern. He had interfered in more than one marriage before, always targeting women who were vulnerable, women whose husbands were sick, absent, or distracted. He would play the role of comforter, slipping into lives where cracks had already formed, and then twist the truth to make himself seem like the only one who cared. What shocked me most was that Daniel had found messages between Mark and another woman, written just months after my accident, where Mark bragged about Emily, claiming he had her in the palm of his hand and that she would eventually leave me. It was clear Mark had been manipulating her, pushing her toward betrayal, feeding her fears and loneliness. And while Emily had been weak, she had also cut him off before it went further. She hadn't promised to leave me. She hadn't given him the future he wanted. For the first time in months, I felt a strange kind of peace. The truth hurt, yes, but it also brought clarity. That evening, I sat down with Emily and told her everything I had learned. She broke down again, but this time her tears were different. Not of guilt, but of relief, as if she had been waiting for me to finally believe her. "Ethan," she whispered, "I was wrong, I was weak, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. But I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to leave you. I just lost myself for a moment, and I'm so sorry." I looked at her for a long time, and for the first time since the accident, I reached for her hand willingly. "I can't erase what happened," I said softly, "and it's going to take me a long time to fully trust again. But I don't want to live chained to bitterness. I want to move forward. And if you're willing to keep fighting for us, then so am I." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, gripping my hand tightly as if afraid to ever let go again. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending the betrayal never happened. It meant choosing to live with hope instead of pain, to build something new from the broken pieces. Months later, as I stood with Emily on a quiet hill overlooking the Denver skyline, I realized that life had given me two chances, one when I survived that car accident, and another when I chose not to let betrayal define me. Love is fragile, trust is fragile, but both can be rebuilt with patience, honesty, and time. And though our story would forever carry scars, it was ours. Not perfect, not untouched, but alive. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily slipped her hand into mine. This time, I didn't hesitate. I held on. Because sometimes endings aren't about letting go. Sometimes endings are about beginning